Well, at long last, we've arrived at that point where we can start animating for real here. After all, that's why you bought this program, so that you can bring SketchUp models in and animate them. So let's get into that next. Now, probably the first thing that we should do is we should ask ourselves, what do we want to do? I mean, what do we want to animate? If you're in the process of animating something like you're driving a car, for example, the easiest way to do that is to sit in the car and drive it. That way, most of us are used to that when we drive our cars, so we don't usually stand outside our vehicles with a remote control and drive them around. And though you can do that with the Sketcher Studio, really the easiest way to do it is, I think, to sit behind the wheel of the car. So let's put ourselves behind the wheel of this car. And we can do that. We've got our onboard camera selected. All we have to do is change to the Mini Cooper's onboard camera by selecting it over here. And now that puts us behind the wheel of the car. Now we're canted a little bit to the left here, and it might be okay to drive that way, but I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to position our onboard camera right in the center of the car, so we're looking right down the center of the car as we drive. That'll make it a little bit easier, and then we can always reposition our onboard camera later so that we can view the animation playback from a different position. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the origin settings dialog. Let's just close our active track controller for the moment. And let's click on our camera origin button here so that we can see the view of our onboard camera. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move us over here. I'm going to grab the hand tool and I'm going to slip us over here, kind of over the center of the dashboard like that. And that's actually pretty darn good. I can double click out here in the world and that'll kind of center us up right on the middle of the world. So I just kind of double clicked on that green line and that kind of put the focus where we want. So now we're looking straight ahead and our horizon is off in about the middle of the screen. So we'll use that as our onboard camera direction. And then we'll click apply. And as always, it doesn't immediately update here, but if we just change views and go, let's say, to the camera and then to the Mini Cooper, now we're going to have our view looking straight out the middle of the car. Okay, so now we're positioned so that we can start to drive. Now, I'm going to bring up the control by clicking this button here, the active track controller. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to live mode here by pressing this button that says live mode. And we're going to set a couple of parameters here before we begin to record. This checkbox in the upper left hand corner that says disable up down. Well, since we're driving on the ground, we're not going to be taking our car off the ground. So at this point there's no good reason to give ourselves room to make that mistake. So I'm just going to select this, and that will lock this joystick controller here so that it will only basically work in the left and right mode. If this was unchecked, then we could also animate going up or down, but we don't want to do that this time, so we'll just lock that. And then we'll click this button here that says automatic scene record, and when we do, this turns red, letting us know that we're basically now in record mode. Now all I would have to do is click on this button, this red button, and as soon as I click and hold, we'll start to move forward. Well, we'll do that in just a moment, but I'd like to draw your attention up here for a moment to the animation timeline. In the animation timeline, you can see that we have one of these. We have a blue rectangle here for each of our objects, and this blue rectangle here is basically the equivalent, as we discussed this earlier, of a scene marker in SketchUp. You know, in SketchUp, if you've worked in SketchUp much, that you can position your camera and then you can record a scene, and then you can reposition your camera and record another scene. And then when you use the very limited animation playback capabilities that SketchUp has, it will basically perform what's called a tween, which is a transition from the first scene marker that you set to the new position saved in the second scene marker. So you're moving in between those two in a series of smooth increments, and that is known as a tween. Well, in effect, we've got the same thing going on here in Sketcher Studio. Whenever you create a scene marker, which you can do simply by positioning your timeline cursor to the end of the track, and then if I were to hit the N key, that would add a new track. That adds a new track. That's N for new. That would add a new track, and you could manually set these tracks, and then you can change your position of your vehicle if you want, actually by using stepping outside of the vehicle, maybe from the free camera view, and then use your move tool up here to actually move the car to another location. That would be one way of doing it, one scene at a time, similar to what you would do in SketchUp, except for here the object is moving and not just the camera. But we're not going to do that. We're going to use the active track controller, and we're going to record these in real time. So we don't need this this scene marker that I just put in. So I'm just going to go Command Z to delete that. And later on, after we've recorded these, we'll talk more about these track markers and what you can do with them. Okay, so just notice that as this red cursor moves while we're recording, that it's going to be adding track markers as we go. Alright, so we're about ready to record. Now once we start to record, we're actually going to be moving this Mini Cooper forward. We are moving the Mini Cooper because we've selected it here in the track selector, and we're going to be moving it forward as soon as I click down on this red button. The speed with which we move can be controlled up here, this little slider. So if I feel like I would like to move faster when I'm recording, all I have to do is increase this so that we move faster, or I can slow it down here. But that's just for the recording process, just to give us a little free rein over how fast we want this to happen. I'm going to use the default setting, and we're going to start to record in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to click down on the mouse, and now we're starting to move forward. Now if I move the mouse a little bit to the left, you'll see that that moves us to the left. So we're kind of coming out of the pit here, and I'm just steering with the mouse, and we'll just come in here and we'll just follow this around. And I'm just holding the mouse button down, and that's how we're moving. You see up there the track marker and the timeline. You can see that it's adding track markers, and we'll just continue to move on here. So I'm going to steer around this corner. That wasn't a very good turn. Later on we can come back and fix that. We'll come around this turn here and straighten out, and let's go back into the pit. And I'll just let go of the mouse button, and that stops our recording. It's that simple. Let's turn off live mode, let's hide our active track controller, and let's play it back. Now we can get back to the beginning of our recording by hitting the stop button, and what that does is it always, when you hit the stop button, it always takes you back to the beginning. I could also go back one scene at a time, and if I wanted to do that, I would just press this button down here, and you can see that, let's see here. Okay, so that time it jumped us back to the beginning. Sometimes it will. I think if it's at the very end, it might. Haven't quite figured that one out yet. But if I click this right one here, you'll see that it moves us one scene forward at a time, or I can move backwards one scene at a time. I could go all the way to the end by clicking this many times, but it's going to take a while to get out there, as you can see. But in our 3D view, you can now see where each of those tracks was recorded. But if I wanted to just get back to the beginning in one move, I would just hit the stop button, and that'll move us all the way back to the beginning. If I press the play button, it starts to play, just like it was recorded before. And it's moving kind of slowly here. In fact, if I step outside to my free camera, and let's position our free camera somewhere where we can really get a good view here. I'm just using my mouse wheel and moving back so that we can kind of get an overview, and I'll switch to the orbit tool and the hand tool and just try and position myself so I can kind of see what's going on here. And the orbit tool, and there's our car. It's passing under this overpass here. I'll just double click here to kind of center up. So you can see there's our car following its animation. It's moving pretty slowly, and we'll be able to change its speed here in just a moment. I'm going to show you how to do that. But it's actually following an animation path, and the animation path is invisible right now. You can't actually see what that path is. But if you look up here on the left, there's this little button I told you about earlier. If I click that button, it shows us the animation path. And so that way we can see, and each one of these little dots is numbered. You can't see it very well from here, but those numbers correspond to the numbers given here on the track markers. Now let's say that we want to do some editing on this. Maybe we want to change our approach on some of these turns. Well, we can do that quite easily here by just manipulating the position of these track markers. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I want to move our car back to this track marker. Now I could probably do that just by clicking on these guys and finding the one that belongs with that position. But it's also easier actually to do this using a keyboard shortcut. And just like we talked about down here, when you can click these double left arrow buttons, or these left arrow buttons, I'm sorry, these ones here, these will move you back one scene at a time. These will move you forward one frame at a time. And if you want to move one scene at a time, there's a keyboard shortcut for that. By holding down the Option key and then using on your keyboard your left and right arrow keys, you'll be able to move forwards and backwards. So I'm using the left arrow key while I'm holding down the Option key, and that moves me back. So now I'm positioning myself on this marker here, on this scene marker. And now what I want to do is I want to adjust the car's position so that we get a kind of a smooth motion of going around this curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the M key to get the move tool, and then I'll just click and move the car to a better position. Put it right here. I'll let go of the mouse, and when I do, you'll see the path adjusts to fit. And maybe that's still a little off. We'll go do it like that. And then here it looks like we swing a little wide, so let's bring the car in by moving up one keyframe, or up one scene marker, and let's just move it in a little bit so that we're more on the line here. And we can move up to the next one, and we'll put that one on the line as well. And that makes it look a little bit better. Okay, so let's see, is there anywhere else that we would like to edit here? I'm going to click my orbit tool and maybe come around here. Looks like we cut that corner just a little bit tight, so I think I'll go ahead and fix that too, holding down the Option key and hitting the back button several times, or the left arrow, and that'll finally get me to this point where I can now manipulate this one. I'll again grab my move tool and move them out just a little bit here like that, and that'll give us a little bit better of a fit. And while we're at it, this one over here too probably needs a little bit of correction. Just a hair. So we'll come back over like that. Maybe a little bit more still. Here we go. And looks like the next one could use a little correcting. I guess we could get pretty carried away with this. But this is how you just go in and you kind of tweak things in. Just like that. We go to the next one here. This one here. And let's come out just a hair. Like that. And this one. So that we make a little bit more of a wide approach on this. Kind of like that. Okay. Well, that's not too bad. And then if we press the play button over here, we can see it actually making its turn around the curves and moving back to position. Now, I'd like you to notice that we are missing one here. It stopped at this location right here. And if I go back to our onboard camera, you can see that we're still a little bit away from our end point. So that's something that we can also fix here. And the reason that it did that is because we stopped recording before we actually crossed over our same point. So each one of these scenes will extend out for a couple of ticks here on the timeline. And if you don't get all the way to the end of one of them, like here with this one, if you don't reach the end of it, it doesn't start recording the next one. So we just happened to be at that position somewhere in the middle of that last scene, and though we were farther up when we stopped it, we hadn't yet begun another scene that would have left us closer to this. So what we'll do is let's jump outside again here. We'll just click on our free camera, and I think what we'll do is kind of center up on this point where we are here and zoom in. Oops. Go to the well, actually I'll just use our dolly tool, and I'll just dolly in like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move tool here. I could do this two ways. One is I could come here to the end and I could add a new track marker. That might be actually the way to do this, or a scene marker. I'll just press the N key and add a new one. And then what I'll do is I will use the move tool, pressing M for the move tool. And now I'll just drag our guy up to about here. And when I release, it adds another segment here. And so that'll get us right to the very end. So in this case now, if I press play, you can see, oops, let's see, let's go back one. Okay, we're on the first one right now. So in order to get to the last one, that's because we moved our timeline here all the way back to the beginning. And so I can't go back because there is no back from 0. So I can jump all the way to the end, and the only way I would be able to do that from here is to just click one at a time. So I could get there quicker down here at the bottom just by going down to this last track marker and selecting it there. And if I double click on it, it will actually put us on that position. And then I can just back us up a few frames here like that, come down and press the play button, and you'll see the car come driving up in just a moment here. I maybe went back a little bit too far. So it's getting ready to approach. Here it comes, and it just keeps on going right up to there. Okay, so that's how we fix that. Okay, now the other problem, if you hadn't noticed, and I'm sure you had, is just how quickly or how slow the car is going. When I press play here, the car is moving out rather slowly. Not much of a race car. So let's fix the speed of our car next.